upcoming fight night. This fight night, I will say, I'm very excited about the main event and co-main event and some of the other fights on here too, actually. Israel Adesanya versus Joe Pyfer from Seattle, Washington. Looks like a 8 p.m. Eastern time start. Let's talk about some other fights on this card first.
Yeah, this card seems like it'd be a lot more fun. So I'm kind of looking forward to this one. On the prelims, you got Ricky Simon versus Adrian Yanez. That's a fun fight. You got number 8 heavyweight Marcin Tybura fighting Tyrell Fortune, who doesn't even have a picture on the UFC website. He's number 8. He's fighting unranked, non-pictured Tyrell Fortune. Heavyweight division in shambles. Chase Hooper versus Lance Gibson Jr. That's fun. And possible fight of the night, Ignacio Bahamondes versus Tofik Musayev. Don't know too much about Musayev except that he comes from Bellator and Ryzen, he has like 18 KOs or something. He knocks a lot of people out. We know what Bahamondes does. Super exciting fighter, also a KO artist. So everyone keep an eye on that one. Undercard, Terrance McKinney versus Kyle Nelson. Both guys like to bang and go early. Terrance McKinney rarely makes it out of the first round, whether he's on his back or standing at the end of the fight, we don't know, but it probably isn't going around 2. And then Michael Chiesa is either fighting Nico Price or Carlston Harris. I don't know. Somebody pulled out, but I don't know what the original fight was. So either way, I think it could be Chiesa's last fight. I don't know how many fights he has on his contract, but it seems like it'd be time for him to hang him up after this one.
And he's from the Seattle, Washington area.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Chiesa, he won that Ultimate Fighter live, which I always thought
the hardest Ultimate Fighter for sure.
Yeah, and it was so grueling because the previous ones are taped, so you can kind of manipulate the schedule a little bit. Whereas he literally had to fight, pretty much.
Well, he's the wave too. It takes forever to do that. So
he lost his father during that show too.
Right, that was at lightweight too, where he was killing himself to make weight. Now he's at 170 and he kills himself to make 170. He's a big dude.
Yeah, I always thought Chiesa had a solid career. I don't know that he's going to go into UFC Hall of Fame or anything, but he had a solid, successful career. And
great, funky grappling. Never really mastered any striking, but made wrestling exciting.
Oh, I will say that one of my favorite things and I like Chiesa, but one of my favorite things that he wasn't on the well-receiving end of. I get it. When he was young in his career and hadn't wins, his first loss, I believe, was to Joe Lozon in the UFC. In a fight that was competitive and then got stopped, and he thought he should have gone. And he was capable, but it was understandable stopped. But I remember he kept trying to do rematches, and Joe Lozon just responded, "Rematches are dumb." And I thought that's a great
owned, yeah. Yeah. Let's get into this co-main event here. We got a couple good fights here at the end of this card. Alexa Grasso versus Maycee Barber.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Maycee Barber, 15-2, 6 KOs, 2 subs, 7 decisions. She's on a 7-fight win streak since her last loss to Alexa Grasso by decision in 2021. She's had performance of the night, and she's tied with Manon Fiorot for second most knockouts in UFC women's flyweight division history, only behind Valentina. So, she's one of the more stronger women, I would say, in this division. Grasso, though, 16-5-1, 4 KOs, 2 subs, 10 decisions. She, of course, is a former UFC women's flyweight champion. She's had fight of the night, performance of the night. She is on a 2-fight losing streak right now, having just lost her title to the legendary Valentina and Natalie Silva, who, could be fighting for the title next for all I know. So, so no shame in those losses whatsoever. I will say I got to favor Grasso still, only because she has the prior win. I'm not saying she's going to win, but I will also say this is the best time for Maycee Barber to probably have this fight after you're getting all those momentums, all that wins, all those wins and all that momentum. And now you're facing Grasso at this point, who just lost the title, just lost to the fight. Her back's against the corner. I think it's an interesting matchup. I'll pick with my heart. I like Grasso, but I'm going to go Maycee Barber by decision.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think just timing wise, Maycee is at this high and Grasso's at this low. And I think those Valentina fights and the Silva fight have taken a lot out of Grasso. Not to say that she can't still be champ, but I just think that Maycee Barber, although probably technically less skilled everywhere, is just more of a dog, just a fighter instead of like an athlete. I mean, she's a good athlete too, but she just is tough as shit. And I think she just kind of be the aggressor in there. And, you know, she was very young the first time that she fought Grasso. I think she's learned a lot in the octagon since then. So I think she grinds out a decision win. Main event here, number 4, Israel Adesanya versus number 14, Joe Pyfer.
So while I was looking at my phone, I wanted to check a few things for this fight in particular. Some interesting stats here. Joe Pyfer, 15-3, 9 KOs, 4 subs, 2 decisions. He's won 7 out of his last 8 fights. I forgot to check his amateur career, but as far as I know, what I've seen is he's never been knocked out. He's had an injury that stopped him, and he's lost the decision, but he's never been knocked out. So I think that's interesting when you're going up against a striker at the level of Adesanya. 24-5, 16 KOs, 8 decisions for Adesanya. This guy's already had a Hall of Fame fight with Kelvin Gastelum. More on that in our Patreon talk later. Former UFC middleweight champion, 5 successful title defenses in his first reign. He, of course, was a 2-time middleweight champion. He's a legend. And unfortunately, we talked about this. A lot of legends might be leaving the UFC soon. It's just about that time. Will this be his time? It is interesting because I feel like this is going to go 2 ways. I feel like Joe Pyfer is either going to take him out early, like possibly in the first 2 rounds, you know, catch him with that power. But as the fight goes on, despite the fact he's on a 3-fight losing streak to some of the best in the world, I feel like Adesanya, with his experience and his level of his striking, I feel like I'm going to favor Adesanya in the later rounds. Man, I like Joe. I want to see Joe kind of get some momentum, but I don't really want to see Adesanya go yet. I'm going to pick Adesanya. Again, probably going with my heart here, but I'm going to go late 4th round TKO.
Yeah, I think Prime Izzy would probably make the Joe Pyfer that fought Gastelum anyway look silly. So, you know, but time comes for us all. Izzy is not in his prime anymore. I'm with you. I still think I give Adesanya the edge.
Yeah.
But if Pyfer has learned not to headhunt like in that Gastelum fight, his chances go way up. He really only needs to touch Izzy one time to put him out. He holds the record on that power cube thing. You know, he broke, Francis Ngannou's record, which I don't know how I feel about that or whatever. Take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, apparently he punches harder than Francis Ngannou. So
I've always thought the same thing, by the way. I've always been suspicious of that. I'm like, this doesn't make sense to my
UFC totally wouldn't, just dismiss Francis Ngannou because he's not in there anymore. So they wouldn't lie about his power cube numbers. But anyway, Joe Pyfer, regardless, punches very fucking hard. So Izzy needs to mind his P's and Q's. But I'm with you. I don't think it's time for him to. I don't think he has such a decline where he can't dodge a head hunting power puncher. He's seen that a million times throughout his career. So I'm hoping he's able to do it one more time and he can style on Joe Pyfer. Although I'm with you. I'm a fan of Joe Pyfer. I just am not ready to see Izzy go out on his, face down yet. So Israel by decision, I think. I think Joe Pyfer makes it to the end, but it's also, I could also see him tiring Joe out. Joe's trying to swing, he gets tired, and then that's when Izzy puts it on you and he'll finish you. But I'm going to go decision.
That's what I meant by late 4th round TKO. I didn't expand. I do see Pyfer getting tired as the fight goes on. Again, I could also see Pyfer taking him out early. And if Pyfer is continuing to evolve, it's not going to be like the most shocking thing if he can finish him late either. For Izzy, it's like, too, it's actually very similar. The main event and co-main event are very similar in the sense I feel like both people who I would conceive as the underdogs, maybe slight underdogs, or at least not as established, are fighting the top people at the right
cream of the crop. Yeah. At the right time. Yeah.
So, and I also just think for Izzy, it's interesting because, and this is maybe just me thinking, I wonder how many fights he has left on his contract, because for him at this stage, like if he can get a win and he only has like one other fight, like he's a guy that could make some money and be a big name, out there for an MVP promotions or something too.
Him and Darren Till or something, MVP would be really fun. But I don't know. I think Izzy has stated that he kind of wants to hang around, even if like being champ isn't in the cards. He just wants like fun fights. But I don't know what fun fights there are for him anymore. There's no like real, like, I don't know, just like that division, you've kind of fought all the people who really want to see you fight. So,
and I don't want to see you fight Alex Pereira anymore because
I don't want to see Pereira. I don't want to see Hosma. Like,
yeah.
I don't want to see any. Yeah. So,
But we will talk.
I'd rather he went to MVP and made a bunch more money and was really put on as a star like he should be.
Absolutely. I'd love to see him fight like a, a Darren Till, like you said, for instance, or
Luke Rockhold,
MVP himself, a Mike Perry, or anybody of those guys would be interesting. Izzy and Bare Knuckle would be one of those guys. I wouldn't hate the idea because he is such an elite striker. I'd be interested. I'm not totally on board with it because I could see that going really bad too, but I could definitely think he'd be interesting to watch. So I don't know. It's one of those funny moments where you almost want to say all the top stars you want to see in the UFC, but Izzy's one of those guys. I think there's more interesting fights for him actually elsewhere at this point in his career.
Right.
But